Thank you. Today we will discuss prudent information related to effective communication skills. This presentation will analyze various procedures and techniques that will significantly improve your ability to communicate effectively, and will do so by employing a well-known technique called transactional analysis to make us have a better communication. Now, it is understandable that each of you are saying, I don't know why I'm listening to this presentation. I know how to communicate. It's about as easy as making duck soup. And after all, I have conversations either of my free will or I do it perfunctorily when I'm involved in a conversation. And babies know how to communicate. Animals, insects, all living things know how to communicate. So it's very simple. Well, the truth of the matter is we're just lousy at effective communication. And this is why we're having this oral narrative to help you to become a better communicator. And we're going to call this the self-efficacy of utilizing transactional analysis to ameliorate communication skills. But why do we communicate and how do we communicate? Well, we communicate to carry on social intercourse and to gather information and to give information. But how do we communicate? Well, we use two programs. We communicate verbally. We also communicate non-verbally, such as hugging, kissing, sexual intercourse, smiles, stares, sign language, and electronic procedures, and so forth. But we also communicate by reading and listening. And when we read something, we either learn, that's a type of communication, or we unlearn what we thought we knew. Now, listening, you say, is a very easy thing. No, listening is very laborious, especially if we believe that we're erudite and what someone is saying is very trivial and we can anticipate what they're going to say. We listen about 3 hours per day, but listening is very difficult. Consider this. If you are having a conversation with someone and you have to stop and go and do something, and when you come back and join that conversation, it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to get back into the flow of that conversation, to understand the little things that were said there. If we have a conversation with someone, say for 10 minutes, 2 weeks later, we are lucky if we can remember 50% of what was said during that conversation. Our attention span is about 2 to 3 minutes. Now, here's something else. You say, well, I know how to communicate. I can do 2 things at one time. It's called multitasking. I'm great at it. Well, you're not really great at it. No one is. The brain cannot be divided into various hemispheres like a computer. What the brain is trained to do is to focus on one thing and to do it very effectively. And you're asking the brain to go from this to this, and it's not splitting up. And you know what happens when the brain decides, oh, this is very important, I'm going to focus on this. And if you're driving, well, you know what can happen. Just don't have the conversation if you are busy. Okay, but what components determine our communication skills? Well, let's take Sigmund Freud. He said that to be a whole person, to be able to communicate, we need 3 components. And he called those components egos. He said they make us whole, and without them, we do not function properly. And the 3 egos are the id, he named, the ego, the superego. So let's take a look at that real quickly. What is the ego, according to Sigmund Freud? Well, it is very selfish. It wants instant gratification. It gives us our drives. It's prudent, and a few other things. But let's go to the ego. Ego is more rational. It thinks of the here and now. It doesn't judge. The superego is our conscious, the moral part of our brain. tells us, oh, you shouldn't do this, and so forth. Now, each one of these egos will have an advantage and a disadvantage. Let's take a look at that. The ego is like a moderator between the two. The ego may say something like this, oh, you're being too selfish, stop it. Superego, you know what, you're making people feel guilty too long. It's not something that's so offensive, stop it. So it's a moderator. Now, what is transactional analysis? That's what we're here for. We're going to talk about how transactional analysis can make you a better communicator, have better communication skills. Well, transaction is social intercourse or social commerce. Analysis is where you break things down and look at it. So simply put, transactional analysis is the interaction between people for you to analyze, am I saying the right things? What are they saying? And so forth. Now, transactional analysis is nothing new. It started in 1964. The person who initiates the contact will be called a transactional stimulus. The person who receives that information is called a transaction receiver or respondent. Because we know if you put two people in a room, some kind of communication is going to take place. So this brings us to Eric Berne, a psychiatrist, who coined transactional analysis, and he did in 1964. Wrote a book. It's a very popular book called Games People Play. And he said games is the reason I named it that is because people manipulate the conversation. They have hidden agendas. So I'll call it Games People Play. And this transactional analysis was used in therapy. It was used in prisons, Fortune 500 seminars, and so forth. But Berne said we have three egos. Now, keep in mind, he's going to piggyback off of Sigmund Freud. He said those three egos make us whole. They're always in our head. It depends on which one that we respond from, that we communicate out of. And they are the parent, the adult, and the child egos. Now, what is the parent? Well, the parent is nurturing. The parent is caring. But the parent is very castigating, criticized too much. But we do need the parent to keep the human race going, don't we? And the parents think of the future, you know, instead of the now. What about an adult? Well, the adult is more rational. It thinks of the here and now, doesn't judge. Now, that brings us to the child ego. Well, they're callow. They want instant gratification. They're selfish. Now, if you can see the correlation there between Berne and Freud, I'm sure you can make the connection there. Now, what are the three kinds of psychological transactions that Eric Berne talks about? Well, he said you have the complementary transactions where everything is going okay or compatible. Then you have the conflict or cross where the lines of communication have become stagnant. And then you have ulterior transactions. Now, we're not going to talk about ulterior transaction, not for this presentation. So with that in mind, let's play the game of transactional analysis. And I'm going to let you jump in here. Let's say there are two ladies at a bus stop. And one lady says to the other lady, you know, the buses are never on time. I'm so sick of this. If I had a vehicle, I'd never ride a bus. Okay. Now, that lady is going to be the stimulus. The person that she's talking to will be the receiver or the respondent. Now, here are your three egos. As you can see, person one, person two. Those are the three egos that we use from time to time. We fluctuate between the ego depending on our mood, our environment, and so forth. Now, the lady had just said the buses are filthy and They're never on time. Now, how does she sound? She sounds like a parent talking to another person, and she wants and hopes that that person is in a parent ego also, because she's in a parent ego. Okay, let's make that like that. And she sends a message here. Now, this can be complimentary or it can be conflict. But the person who's standing there also says, you know what? Most of the time they got drunks in there. They're just the pits. I really don't like riding them either. Now, that is complimentary, isn't it? Nothing wrong. The lines of communication. So she responds in a complimentary way. Now, she could have come out of an adult and said something like, you know, they are going to get better. We just got to give them time. Now, that sounds like an adult ego, doesn't it? Responded and to another adult. Well, if that happens, it's going to be a conflict. All right. Let's take two men. And one man says to the other one, I think I would like to get me one of those smartphones. My granddaughter say you can do this and you can do that with it. Now, what ego is that? Well, that's an adult, you know, just rational. And he says that to his friend. And of course, his friend, he hopes, is in an adult ego also. So he sends that message there. There you go. And his friend is. And his friend says to him, hey, you're very good with technology. I don't have any skills. Well, that sounds okay. So that's complimentary. But in this case, his friend was, I don't know, jealous or in a rotten mood. And his friend says to him, you know something? I don't know why you would waste your money on one of those things. You don't know how to use a flip phone. And why would you do this here? And there's so much technology in your car, you haven't even learned how to use that. Now, that sounds like a what? A parent castigating, criticizing, talking to a child. And so he comes out of this parent ego, talking to his friend as if his friend is in a child ego. And here we go. Now, that's going to be a conflict there, isn't it? Okay. Or he could have come out of a child ego, his friend, and said something like, I don't care, do whatever you want to do. Well, that's the way a child would talk to a parent. It still would be cross, wouldn't it? Let's take one more here. How about a supervisor? And this supervisor is going to be talking to the employee. The supervisor stimulus, the employee is the receiver here. And the supervisor says, you know something, I'm getting sick and tired of you coming to work dilatory. Do I have to buy you an alarm clock? You have 3 kids, you're not married, and so forth. Now, she's talking like a parent would talk instead of an adult to a child. Let's just go ahead and mark that one up. Okay. This employee can respond out of 3 egos depending on what she feels about herself at the time. Let's say she says, you're right, I am worthless. I shouldn't even be working. Now that's complimentary, isn't it? As if she's talking to a parent. And remember, this person talked to her as if she was a parent. Now, let's step back a minute. Let's say that this lady says, I am sick and tired of everybody picking on me. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to stand my ground. So this employee, instead of coming out of a child ego, comes out of a parent and say, you know something, everybody know how you procured your job. You slept your way up the ladder. And look at those tacky clothes in your hair. You need to do something about that. She's castigating her like a parent would do. So she's coming out of a parent ego as if she's talking to a child. Now guess what? That's a conflict that's caused. She's probably not going to have a job very long. She's going to get cashiered from that job. Let's take a husband and a wife. And the wife says, honey, have you seen those earrings that you bought me, the diamond ones, the small ones, for our 5th anniversary? Now, that sounds like an adult talking, doesn't it? Rational. And she's in the adult ego. So she sends that message to him. Okay. Hoping that he's in adult ego also. And he says to her, no, I haven't, but I'll help you look for them. As soon as the ball game is over, it'll be over in 10 minutes. Now, what do you think? What ego is her husband in? You're right. In an adult, when he says that. Compatible, complementary here. No conflict there. The lines of communication are fluid. But let's say he's in a rotten mood and he says something like, no, I haven't seen him. But you know something? You need to buy yourself a jewelry box. You know, I worked 2 jobs to get you those earrings. You know, it's really ridiculous. Well, guess what? That's a conflict. You got it. He's talking. He's coming out of a parent ego, speaking to his wife as if she's a child, and you know what's going to happen there. And then later, this could proceed further. And he could say something like, I think I want to buy me a laptop computer. Okay, he's talking like an adult now, isn't he? All right. That sounds okay, right? Okay, so he's in an adult ego. Let's see if his wife is in an adult ego. And she says, you know something? You don't need to get one. You're lousy at everything. We don't need the money. I've tried to show you how to use the computer. You can't even do that. She's talking to him as if he is a child and she's coming out of the parent. Now this is going to be crossed up. It's a conflict. Okay, I'm going to give you one. How about this one for you? You have an adolescent. She's in college and she says, you know something, Daddy? I'm going to need a new laptop computer and I'm going to need a few other things and this and that. What ego is she in? Adult, you're right. Even though she's only 21 or something. And she says to her father as if he's in an adult ego state. Well, he's not. And he says something like, you're not passing. I don't know why you went to college. You were lousy in high school with your grades. Which one? You're right. That's a parent talking to a child. And she's not a child in this case. And it's going to be a conflict here. She's going to feel bad. Okay, I think we can stop there. And I think you got the process of transactional analysis and which ego you should be in. But let's take a look at something else here real quickly. Yeah, we can do this. Okay. Real quickly, let's go to another type of transactional analysis. And this is by Thomas Harris. He just piggybacked on what Eric Burns said. And of course, they both are trying to dovetail to Sigmund Freud in his analysis of how we communicate in the 3 egos and so forth. Well, Harris wrote an award-winning book in 1967 called I'm Okay, You're Okay. Sounds appropriate, does it? But he's still using transactional analysis to get his point over. But Harris said we have 4 life positions or 4 egos that we use to communicate with people to make us whole, and we just switch or vacillate between the 4 depending on our moods like we did the other one. Okay, the first one, as you can see, says I'm okay, you're not okay. Now, this could be a number of things. It could be a race of people saying, we're just fine, we're very intelligent, but you, other people over there, this other race of people, you're not. You're shiftless, you're nescence, and so forth. I'm going to let you pick up this one. I'm not okay, you're okay. What about that one? Well, you're right. That is someone who believes that they just don't have anything. They believe they are benighted. They are reprobate, and the reason is simply because when this person said up here, you're not okay, they started believing. They used a little gaslight in here to say that you are shiftless, you're violent, and so forth. And as a result of decades, the person say, I'm not okay, you're okay. Now let's use let's say a female. She's saying, I don't look well at all. I've gained weight, but those other people over there, where I work, are just fine. Everything is great about them. So we could use this in so many ways, couldn't we? The next one, I'm going to let you figure out which one is this one. Boy, I tell you what, my husband is unfaithful, doesn't care. But you know what? All husbands are like this. Every one of them is unfaithful to their wives. You're right. I'm not okay, and you're not okay. And this is misanthropic, isn't it? Okay, no respect for the human race. Let's go quickly to the last one. I'm okay, you okay. Well, that's self-explanatory. We're happy and you matter to us. You're happy. Okay. This brings us to the conclusion of transactional analysis to improve your communication skills. I'm hoping that as you go forward, you'll be able to fine-tune your ability to communicate, and that you will do this with pride and use TA to make you a better communicator here. And that you will be able to synthesize the components that we talked about, the hardware, the software, and put it into one component and make you a better communicator for life. Now, let me add a footnote here. Please do not use always and never. And here's something else. Try to avoid this statement. I know why you did this. I know why you come home from work late. Well, if you know, why would you ask? The person's going to parry from you. They're not going to answer. They're going to say, well, you already know. So why should I have to answer that? Here's something else. Try to apologize when necessary. Even if you feel that it was not your fault, the person misunderstood what you said. Just apologize. You'll keep friends this way, and that's part of communication. And another thing I should have you to underscore: when you're talking to someone, give the main idea. They will ask supporting details like, I just purchased a new vehicle. And instead of saying, oh, wow, I went downtown, I saw this vehicle, I needed one so long. No, just say, I purchased a new vehicle. And before you can complete your statement, they're going to say, how much did it cost? Where did you get it? And that works pretty well. Okay. I want you to like me on Facebook, which is Clifton Castile. I want you to also go to my internet website, which is cliftoncastile.com, and there you'll be able to get a better perspective of me, and you'll be able to download some of my published articles for peer review. And I think we have really had a nice time here. I certainly believe that this will make you a better communicator, and you'll have better communication skills, and it will last you a lifetime. I have had so much fun here, and you know what? I'm going to see you again real soon. But until then, go out there and be a better communicator and use transactional analysis. Think before you say something. Good day now.